Hi everyone. Good afternoon and good evening to some of you. Thank you for joining the second series of the APFCB Siemens educational webinar. Okay, before I pass this on to Sam from APFCB, I would like to do a little housekeeping here. Towards the end of the session, we will have a 5 minutes Q&A. So you can use the Q&A chat box on the right-hand side of the screen and send in your question. Our speaker will try his best to answer your question. You may start sending your question during his presentation. So, okay, without further ado, I will pass this on to Sam. Okay, Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Raymond. My name is Sam Vasikaran. I'm the chair of the APFCB Education Committee, and on behalf of APFCB, welcome to this webinar. First of all, let me thank Siemens Diagnostics for sponsoring this event, and Raymond G. from Siemens for making all the preparations and the organization of this event. The speaker today is Ian Goodall. Ian is an expert on glycosylated hemoglobin. He is based in Melbourne. He is a graduate of Melbourne Uni and has been working at the Austin Hospital in Melbourne for the last 43 years. And he's a fellow of the AACB, AIMS, as well as the Faculty of Science of the Royal College of Pathologists of Australasia. And importantly, he is a founding member of the IFCC working group on standardization of HbA1c and has been on that working group since it completed its work last year. And now we are in the implementation stage, and so he's going to talk to us about the practical aspects of HbA1b standardization. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So will I'll just start now. I first started with hemoglobin A1Cs in first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone around Southeast Asia, in India, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Philippines, and Malaysia, and Sam in Perth. So welcome all. So what I'm going to talk about is the IFCC standardisation of hemoglobin A1c, which is already well entrenched, and the global units for hemoglobin A1c, which have really just started over the last 2 years, and in some countries like England and New Zealand are pretty well finished with it. They've done their 2 years. So the Austin Health is in Melbourne, and it's one of Melbourne's largest teaching hospitals. And just the other thing on the screen here, I've been a member of the IFCC working group on standardisation of hemoglobin A1c since it started in 1994 till it was wound up in 2010. So I'll just move on to the slides. Okay. The very important things about diabetes are that it's an absolute global epidemic in both developed and undeveloped countries. And these are world WHO figures. And from 1985, when there was 30 million, they've estimated that in 2025, it will be 320 million diabetics worldwide. So that's a tenfold increase in 40 years, and so estimated that diabetes will completely obliterate many of the world's countries in terms of economics, because it'll be so costly looking after the people. And the second important thing about diabetes is the long-term complications. The life expectancy is very much low. Juvenile diabetes, 15 to 20% dead in 20 years, and 50% dead in 30 years. And it's responsible for pretty well long-term complications in every organ, and particularly the eyes, blindness. 12% of all cases of blindness are caused by diabetes, 25% of all cases of renal failure, and 40% of all non-traumatic foot and leg amputations. So it's a very serious disease. But the complications really spread all around the body. So the life expectancy is, the mortality is 5 to 10 times a non-diabetic. The average life expectancy is 70% of a non-diabetic. And I'll just pass over some of these things that I haven't talked about yet. But strokes and AMRs and peripheral vascular disease are about 4 times more prevalent in diabetes than in non-diabetics. And reproduction, the impotence in diabetes is 40% versus 5% in non-diabetes. And congenital, the other factor is that congenital malformations in pregnancy are 2 to 3 times that the occurrence as in non-diabetics. So it's a very serious disease and a very prevalent disease. So just briefly, hemoglobin A1C is formed by a two-stage reaction, glucose reacting with the N-terminal valines of hemoglobin A in a non-enzymatic reversible fashion to form albumin hemoglobin A1C. And that can take just minutes to hours. And you can even do it in a test tube with glucose, and then it occurs another non-enzymatic. But the first stage is reversible. The second stage is irreversible to form ketoamine, and this is the thing that we measure in all our assays, either by assays being specific to ketoamine or pre-treatment washing away the albumin. So 60% of the binding of hemoglobin A1C occurs on the N-terminal valines. The hemoglobin A1C is a glycemic control parameter. 50% is determined by the mean blood glucose in the last month, another 25% in the month before that, and another 25% in the 2 months prior to that. So it reflects slightly more the current hyperglycemia than the glycemia 4 months ago. So the IFCC working group was formed in 1994 with its aim to establish a global reference system for hemoglobin A1C. So these were the specific aims, to define hemoglobin A1C, because no one had really defined hemoglobin A1C in those days, to prepare pure standards, because there were no standards then, to develop a reference method, and that's been done with 2 methods, to establish a reference laboratory network, a global network, and that's all in the Northern Hemisphere, to prepare reference calibrators, uniform calibration of all commercial methods, and method comparisons versus the old pre-IFCC standardisation schemes, which were in the United States, Sweden and Japan. But note that there was no mention of this in those days of global units, and it was really just assumed that everyone would be using IFCC units, and there wouldn't be a need to mention that. And the reason, the very reason that there isn't, well, not the reason, but the very fact that there is no mention of global units was really the reason that the IFCC working group was wound up in 2010, because everything else had been done. So the IFCC group originally wasn't kind of selected on any kind of countries. It was more selected on people. And there was initially 8 people from the Netherlands, the United States, Australia, Japan and Sweden. And there, at the end, just prior to the end of the IFCC working group, there was 13, with the inclusion of Germany and Italy and the UK. Let's turn this page over. So there are actually only 4 people of the original 8 that are still on the group, and that's Randy Little, who's the director of the NGSP in the States, Kaz Waykamp, who's been the network coordinator ever since we started, and he's from Winterswijk in Holland, and myself and Jan Ulf Jepsen from Sweden, who's a protein expert. So you can see that it's really centred around the European Union, America, Japan, and me down in Melbourne here, down the south. So the first thing was that these are deliberations of the working group, which took many years, and it really wasn't until 2004 that we published our card on paper. So there've been methods on standards and everything else. I'll just go back to this. So the definition of hemoglobin A1C is it's the N-terminal valine group, which is this beta-N valine glycated hemoglobin, this is the full long name of it, but no one ever knows it by that. So it's a very heterogeneous molecule. There's 44 glycated sites along the chains. This is the purification scheme for the isolation of pure hemoglobin A1C and hemoglobin A0. And these standards are made every year, just once a year. So native blood is washed, lysed, and removal of cell debris, and then spun hemoglobin. And then that's then subject to cation exchange chromatography at pH 6.2 to form crude hemoglobin A1C and crude hemoglobin A0. And that's then subject to affinity chromatography with boronate gels, pH 8, and that forms glycated hemoglobin and non-glycated hemoglobin, and that's then subject to a second identical cation exchange chromatography Cephirose separation, and the result of this is pure hemoglobin A1C with a purity of greater than 99.5, and pure hemoglobin, non-glycated hemoglobin, with a purity of greater than 98.5. And these are now certified Institute of Reference Methods and Materials, and their numbers are 466 and 467. And they're really bought by the companies or by any kind of people who are running major exercises. But the cost of them, I'm not sure how much you get in a vial, but this is about 800 euros, and the non-glycated one's about 600 euros, so they're not cheap. So they're not the kind of things that are ever bought by a laboratory. Okay, the calibrators for the reference method, those two pure HbA0 and HbA1c, are made into a calibration set of 6 calibrators, 0, 3, 6, 9, 12 and 15% hemoglobin A1C. And these are what the companies use to standardise all their assays. And a new batch is made every year, and we've only ever had trouble with one batch about 3 or 4 years ago when the preparation stage they changed the affinity chromatography gel, and it just didn't work at all. I think the results were 2 or 3% different. So for that whole year, the calibration exercise was cancelled, but the previous year's standards, they're very stable. They're stable for 5 to 10 years. They were used, and the gel was changed back. I think it must have been a manufacturer change. Was changed back, and it's been fine ever since. So with the IFCC reference methods, in 1994 there weren't any reference methods. So these took many years, particularly with Boehringer Mannheim in Germany. And we had PhDs employed from BM working pretty well full time on this. So blood, the saline washed to produce the erythrocytes, and then they're treated for 4 hours at 37 degrees to remove albumin, which is the short-term product, and then hydrolyzed with water to produce a hemolysate, and then that is subject to, for 18 hours at 37 degrees, pH 4 with an endoproteinase, glucose C, to form beta-N terminal hexapeptides of hemoglobin A1C and hemoglobin A naught. And then that is then subject to reverse phase HPLC. And there's been two methods developed. One is electrospray ionisation mass spec, and these are kind of $250,000 mass specs, so they're not kind of ones that are used in routine pathology labs. And the other method is capillary electrophoresis. These methods are compared every year, and they're absolutely identical. And at the moment, well, when this was done, there was 4 MS reference labs and 6 CE, and there tends to be about they try and keep it between 10 and 16 per year. They're the same labs, but it takes 2 years to actually become a reference laboratory. And to become a reference lab, they have to pass 2 6-monthly tests. So it's a process that can't really be hurried. So the IFCC network of primary labs, the task is the reliable assignment of target values. And each of the network laboratories, which is on the next slide, has established either one or both of these methods. And the total between labs CV is going to be less than 2.5%. But in fact, the individual labs are all around 1%. And I think the mean of all the labs is 1.1% CV. So I'm not sure when this was, but because there's no dates on these things. But these are the reference labs: 2 in the States, 2 in Germany, 2 in Japan, well, 3 in Japan, Sweden, Italy, and the United States and the Netherlands. So that's Kaz Weykamp and Cor Miedema. And Cor Miedema is now retired, but he was the chairman for something like 10 years. So what we do with the network, apart from obviously ensuring the quality, is running 2 intercomparison studies each year. And these are 6 to 10 samples on a range, and also mixtures and lyophilized H and various different things. And the labs have got to meet very vigorous performance criteria to be confirmed as approved IFCC reference labs. And we've had really excellent performance of the network over the whole period that we've been running these. Okay, each method comparison study, which is done twice a year, these specimens are sent around the world in I'm not sure whether it's liquid nitrogen dry or what, but there's 11, when this was done, there's 11 approved laboratories in Europe, Japan, and in the United States, and these are just the people that run them. There was 4 candidate labs this year, in Germany, 2 in Germany, 2 in the United States. And then there's the designated comparison methods, which are the old methods. So that's the NGSP in America, and they standardise very much of the world. So they've got 4 labs in the States and 4 labs in Europe. And these are their own reference laboratories, as well as IFCC labs. And then there's 3 in Japan, 1 in Sweden in Monoas, and then just me. I'm not a reference laboratory at all, but I've always, we run Primus affinity chromatography, and I've always run in the entire period. But to become a reference laboratory is just horrendous. It's very costly and very time-consuming in both staff and everything else. And then there's the world's manufacturers, So all the major manufacturers in the world take part in this. So there's 8 in Europe, and you can see the names here, 2 in Japan, and 7 in the United States. And this is in 2005. In 2011, remember the IFCC working group was actually closed down in 2010. We had the last meeting in Cape Town in February 2010. Let's move these pages along a bit. So what we've got, there's been a couple of labs like Sweden have now, John Olaf Jepson's retired, and they've withdrawn their kind of approved network laboratories. So what we've got actually is 11 IFCC network full network laboratories, and they're the candidate laboratories at the moment, and they would be undergoing this through the 2-year. I'm not sure how far they are through the 2-year. In Shanghai, in Reims in France, in Calcutta in India, and Seoul in South Korea. So those 4 are undergoing this reference passing of standardisation, and the actual reference website for the IFCC working group has actually been closed, but there is now a website which is www.ifcchpa1c.net, which has all the information and the publications that the group has done. And it really contains everything apart from the working group members, because there are now no working group members. The laboratory network is actually still running. The laboratory network which standardised everything, and that will just continue running. But the actual working group themselves no longer meet. Okay, the old networks, Japan, Sweden, and the United States, are all arbitrary based on different HPLC ion exchange methods. And HbA1c is a peak on a chromatogram. And due to interferences, all these methods define their own values, and they're different for each designated comparison method. So there's a whole lot of problems with them, which I'll just run through the ones with the American system. So the numbers are really only relative, and they're not true hemoglobin A1C values. Yes, so I've been through all that. Okay. So there's a full traceability chain through the IFCC network and through the IRM calibrators, through bloods, and to each manufacturer's internal standards and and individual product calibrators, through patients to the end result. So the IFCC method is the only method that there is certified calibration right through. And full traceability. So I might just say something about the rest of the world. Outside outside these countries, the United States, Japan, and Sweden, people largely are based on the NGSP, the American system, and NGSP is based in Columbia, in Missouri, and they're based on commercial methods calibrated to the DCCT. But and that includes Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Asia, except Japan, and Africa, South and Central America, and everywhere else. This is the BioRx 70, which was the standard for the DCCT, and you can see that the separation is really bad. This is hemoglobin A1C, this is hemoglobin A0, and this is all the pre-stuff, A1A and A1B, and there's no baseline separation. And also, when the BioRx 70 was put through affinity chromatography, you can see that there's actually the black bits here are affinity chromatography positive, so they're glycated hemoglobin, and they're actually glycated hemoglobin in every one of those bands. That's in a normal, and this is in a diabetic. So it's just very fortunate that the kind of glycated parts and the non-glycated parts of these are actually fairly similar, and it hasn't been a major problem around the world. But it just adds to the uncertainty and the non-specificity of the NGSP system. So I've been through most of this. The things that interfere on the NGSP are abnormal hemoglobin variants, S and C and D and E, hemoglobin F from hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin, or any other pregnancy or anything where hemoglobin F has formed thalassemias, and carbon-related hemoglobin, which is present in renal patients. So that affects some methods more than others. Like monoace in Sweden, it was very bad, and there are some methods where one of the old Biorad version 1 was another one that was very severely interfered with, but most of those are now gone. I've mentioned all these. So the traceability of the NGSP system is really to a non-specific peak on a 1980s HPLC, and it's got very high uncertainty. So the QC has changed from things where there was no standardisation really in those early days, and a lot of this is just method units. So these circles here are total hemoglobin. The squares, the triangle things, are hemoglobin A1, before hemoglobin A1C was measured, and then the hemoglobin A1C. So you can see now they're all virtually they all are hemoglobin A1C now. There's no other units. From the many yearly trials that we've run every 6 months, what's been produced is master equations, which are taken from the correlation equation, and this is the American one. Hemoglobin A1C in the NGSP equals 0.915 IFCC plus 2.15, and in Japan it's a slightly different formula, and again in Sweden. And the first paper that had all this in, the full kind of reference stuff, it was this paper in Clinical Chemistry in 2004, volume 50, and this is the one. Okay, so this is the one, the RCC, the full reference system, including the comparisons in the States, Japan, and Sweden, which was done over many years. And now with the IFCC calibration, all kinds of methods, which include cation exchange, affinity, cation exchange, immunoassay, and immunoassay, produce essentially similar results, which never used to happen. The clinical use of hemoglobin A1C is in the long-term monitoring, and also the complication risk, because the higher the hemoglobin A1C, and the target is 7.0% NGSP, and that will be 42 millimoles per mole. But in the United States, it's used for monitoring diabetes services and clinicians and programs, diabetes programs. And there's a move around the world that's particularly prevalent in the States, and Australia is just about to start it. Is for diagnosis of diabetes based purely on hemoglobin A1C, so not on GTT, and the cutoff is 6.5% DCCT. So I want to talk just about the A1C derived average glucose, because that is a study that was designed in America, and we and was, the Americans thought that they would kind of report that instead of hemoglobin A1C. So it was an international study designed to look at the relationship between hemoglobin A1C and average glucose, and then to determine the numerical relationship and establish its validity. And this was done originally in 9 centres in Cameroon, Denmark, Italy, the Netherlands, and 4 centres in the States and in India. But the Indian site was dropped due to specimen handling issues, and that was never operational. So the results of the ADAG study, and unfortunately this really only involved about 500 patients worldwide. From all those centres, there was about 50 or 60 in each centre. So you can see the enormous scatter of the correlation line. I'll just turn my handwritten notes over. Yeah, I know that. So you can see there's absolutely enormous scatter in the trace between average glucose, the mean, and these are the mean of many hundreds of results, and hemoglobin A1C. And the American conclusion was that hemoglobin A1C correlates highly with the mean, average blood glucose, which is obviously, when you think about all the scatter, it's not very good. And this is, but the original kind of study success was predetermined before they actually did any work on this, and the definitions of success was that 90% of the cohort values fell in this range, which is plus or minus 15%. So you get this enormous scatter. But in fact, there's when you look at the other one with the hemoglobin A1C values, there's very few of these values actually above 9%. So there was really not many with really severe diabetes. So the study, and this was subject to peer review everywhere. So there was only 507 patients to kind of change a hugely important parameter of diabetes. There was few patients with poor control. There was very limited ethnic groups. No children, no pregnancies. Excuse me, I'm getting a threat scatter. And the correlation results showed imprecision and wide scatter. And worst of all, the correlation equivalence at the upper limit of level of normal of hemoglobin 6%, the mean blood glucose was 7.0, and at the poor control level of 8%, which is the level that people are supposed to change to total therapy, the mean blood glucose was 10.2, and most diabetics kind of oscillate around these figures all day long. So the actual validity of estimated average glucose was pretty well washed out. And the countries around the world have actually, only America now is staying with estimated average glucose. So there's been several IFCC meetings to set global consensus stations with the American Diabetes Association, the Europeans, the IFCC, and the International Diabetes Federation. And originally they said that they would report IFCC, DCCT, and EAG. And then in 2009, if it passes the criteria, in 2009 they decided that they would report IFCC and DCCT, plus just EAG local if they wanted to. And in the 2010 international consensus, which is still these same groups, and that's the Institution of, I can't remember what this is, but for Pediatric and Adolescent Diabetes. Oh, I think it must be International Society. And then in 2010, they finally decided that they would report IFCC millimole and DCCT, and drop the EAG or the ADAG and just meet again in December 2011. But the Americans have never, ever reported IFCC, even from the very first time when they were supposed to. So these are the kind of ranges that they run from. The current hemoglobin A1C percent will run from about 5 to 12 or 5 to 15 in very high levels. And the RCC SI units will run from 20 to 42 in the normal range, but over a range of about 20 to maybe 150. So there's a much more better scatter, and there's no kind of crossover with glucose values. This is just a thing that's been used kind of in most of the countries that have changed to promote things. So this is the Australian website. It's very difficult really to keep up to date with just what's going on around the world because there's kind of the IFCC working group is not there anymore. But most of the countries that have made decisions, the decisions have really been to go from the old units, which is very largely DCCT or monoacid Sweden, and in the USA, DCCT around, and there have been various different dates and periods, and I'll just run through those individually. And to go to dual units and then to go to millimoles per mole with everyone apart from the Americans who will stay with DCCT. And EAG will be reported, is going to be reported actually in Denmark, but they're still thinking about that. But the only other country that's got it in is the United States. So I'll just move along a bit. So in 2002 there was a consensus statement by the Europeans, by the International Diabetes Federation, the IFCC, and the AACC, the American Clinical Chemists, and the numerical people, CN Centre for, I can't remember what that is. But the clinical requirements of a hemoglobin A1C test include low individual variance, precision that justifies clinicians working on figures of 0.5% CV, and hemoglobin assays, A1C assays of CV less than 2%. And that is really very difficult to achieve. There are very few assays that can achieve 2%. But this is the way precision has kind of got better, and this is from 1996 to 2005, so it's down further than this, but it's not anywhere near 2%. So I'll just move on. What's happened with most of the countries is that they've all done kind of individual things, and this is really probably the most important part of my talk for, for everyone listening, because all the rest of it's already happened. But these are just the way countries did it, and there's very many ways to do it. So Germany enacted a law which states that hemoglobin A1C assays must be reported only in SI units. And they went from DCC to a combined unit for a year, and then they went to IFCC millimoles per mole. So they've actually been on, an EAG was not to be reported, so they've been on that now for well over a year. The United Kingdom had a consensus meeting at the Annals of Clinical Biochem, Association of Clinical Biochem office in London in 2008. I actually went to that meeting, and that was convened by the National Director for Diabetes, the UK Department of Health, and they had 19 associations there, and these were from medical and scientific and diabetes quality control. And all these were representatives of their own associations, so they weren't just kind of individuals. And what they decided was that they've produced a lot of very good publications, which are actually outlined in Diabetic Medicine 2008, volume 25, and pages 381 to 2. And I understand that all these slides will be available to everyone attending later on. So EAG was not to be reported. So New Zealand had no meetings because everyone in New Zealand that's involved with diabetes is actually in this New Zealand Society for the Study of Diabetes, so they don't need to have meetings. They just have a publication, and they're really all professionals involved in the care of people with diabetes. So they're physicians, nurses, podiatrists, dietitians, general physicians, family doctors, and the allied industries and medical scientists. So they went in 2009 from the 1st of August from DCC to combined units, and they will, in a couple of months' time, go to full IFCC sole units, and EAG is not to be reported. Italy had a working group of 20 delegates from national associations, and they met in Milan in 2009, and they were under the kind of auspices of the Italian Society of Clinical Biochem and Clinical Molecular Biology as an umbrella group. And they also have a publication in the CCLM 2010, 48, 625 to 6, and that's the English one. There was about a year before that one in Italian. So that covers kind of changes in reporting units, new units, relationships old versus new, and the timeline for changes. And they're going from, again, DCC to dual units to IFCC units on the 1st of the 1st next year. And EAG, again, is not to be reported. The Netherlands have had several meetings. They had several meetings in 2010, and they had 10 associations. And these were these. So I won't go through them, but they included, obviously, internists, paediatricians, nutritionists, scientists, under the National Diabetes Federation umbrella. And they went on the 6th of April 2010 from DCCT to combine, and they've already gone to full IFCC units only on the 1st of the 1st, 2011 this year. And EAG was not to be reported. And amazingly enough, they actually got 70,000 euros from the Dutch government to do this study, to oversee the whole thing. Sweden has had a collaboration between clinical chemists and 5 medical associations, diabetic nurses and diabetes patients, and they went from mono-S to mono-S plus IFCC to IFCC on the 1st of the 1st this year, so they're already on full IFCC. And one of the important things was they only had dual units for 4 months, which has been the shortest one of any period. Japan is largely run by the Japanese Society of Clinical Chem and the Japanese Diabetes Society, and they have just very recently, only a few months ago, changed from percent JDS, which was about 0.4% less than the NGSP, to add the 0.4% in to get the NGSP value, and then they NGSP, so they're currently reporting this plus IFCC, and they say they will report percent JDS in clinical practice, which is this one here, but no one really knows, what they. But there's a memo come out in note in the 15th of the 5th a month ago that the JDS will report hemoglobin A1C as JDS plus 0.4% and IFCC, and it's really not known whether they will end up in IFCC, but it's very likely that they will, and there are no dates of implementation. So we'll just come to Australia. Next week, Australia is due to start dual units, so we've been very slow. And this has been done by teleconferences and emails with the College of Pathologists, the AACB, the Australian Diabetes Society, the diabetes specialists, and the Australian diabetes educators. And this is on a website, on the AACB website, which I'll just turn this over because it's a very important part here. So the website is www.aacb.asn.au, and there's a position statement in there which has been on there for more than a year. So you go into that, then into the home page, and then down the bottom left into a section resources, and then once you're in resources, then you go across to the position statement in the upper right, and it's a very fiddly thing. But there actually is now there's a new website which is there. I can't change this, but it's that part there, .asn.au, and then //admin, and then /query get file, GETFILE, all one name, and then equals 2802. And that actually brings you straight into that, the 7-page website thing, which has been very important, has been very widely reported, because it gives all the information that anyone's changing units needs to do. So from the 4th of July next week, there's a publication in the Medical Journal of Australia, Volume 195, and that will announce the changes from the 4th of the 7th, from the single units to the dual units, and then from the 4th of the 7th, 2013, to the full IFCC. And again, EAG is not to be reported. So I'll make this the last one. The United States, there's no changes to their current units. They don't use any SI units at all. And what they're going to do is report EAG with every hemoglobin A1C. And that's in their diabetes care January supplement every year. So they've determined that the correlation obtained in the ADAC study is strong enough to justify both an A1C result and an EAG whenever a clinician orders the A1C test. So they're the only country beside Canada which is really just following on from America. And we thought they were originally going to change IFCC, but they've had so much. The Americans have put so much pressure on them not to do that. So the typical plan of action is to convene a working group of official representatives, preferably representing national associations, so they can be clinicians, scientists, pathologists, diabetes organisation and department of, or anyone that's relevant. Convene a national meeting, teleconference or email correspondence, discuss the concept of units and select the units and the future dates, and then prepare educational material for laboratories. And there's plenty of that available already worldwide. So what the IFCC reference system does is really bring in a new precise definition of hemoglobin A1C based on the internal valine, preparation of primary materials, the IFCC reference methods themselves, which are completely new, and the IFCC national reference laboratories. So that really is essentially. I'll just quickly flip, but I think the last two I don't have time to talk in any case. Yes, so I'll just finish there and just thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Yeah, hi. Any question that you can post it on the Q&A chat box? Right. I think okay. If you have further question, you may send an email to me or to Yen himself. Yeah. So anyway, thank you for your time in joining this educational webinar. I hope you enjoyed the session. So do look out for our next webinar, perhaps in a couple of months' time. So once again, thank you, and have a great weekend ahead. Bye-bye.